Good afternoon, everybody. We will make a start in a moment. We'll just wait for everybody to join and we'll get started shortly. All right, terrific. Those numbers look to have steadied a little bit here. So I will make a start and welcome you to this afternoon's webinar, Teaching Little Learners Love Literacy, Year 2, Term 2. My name is Olivia and my colleague Alex will be with us this afternoon as well, presenting alongside me and asking and answering questions in the Q&A as we progress through and at the end of the session. So if you do have a question throughout the presentation, please write it in the Q&A section and we'll do our best to address it at the end of the webinar today. In this presentation, we will be covering the Term 2 scope and sequence, looking at each week by week and day by day learning focus, which you can then take away with you in your planning for Term 2. We will unpack what a Stage 7.5 lesson looks like and discuss how any new instructional routines work. And we'll also provide you with some of the background knowledge on morphology that you'll need to teach this unit. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country our office sits on and where I'm presenting from today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. On screen, you can see our Year 2 teaching sequence. At the top, for Term 1, the Stage 7 review. If you're here in this webinar, it's likely that you've already engaged with this review unit, and we've really enjoyed hearing all of your implementation feedback around this, particularly about how much your students are enjoying our Fluency Fun texts. Then we can see that over Terms 2 and 3, we're looking at Stage 7, Unit 5, and this unit of work focuses mostly on morphology. We cover some of the less common but very useful code, such as alternative graphemes to represent short vowels like EA as in bread and A as in was. So we'll talk more about that in greater detail in just a moment. And then looking ahead at the bottom for Terms 3 and 4, we have Stage 8. This unit is entirely focused on morphology, systematically teaching new prefixes and suffixes whilst revising previously learned content, both phonics and morphology. So you can download this teaching sequence from our website if you haven't already, or via that QR code that's on screen. Stage 7.5, as we just touched on, is taught over Terms 2 and 3. And for Term 2, each week is broken down as shown on screen. So you can see that we cover some of the less common but more useful code as we've just touched on there. You can see that EA representing as in bread in weeks 3 and 4 and revisiting some previous content in weeks 9 and 10 as well. But of course, so exciting as we've touched on all of the morphology there that we have the suffix ED in week 1, week 2 looking at those prefixes pre and re, and those others that you can see on screen, as well as our revision week in week 7 to help prepare for your reporting and assessment there as well. On screen, you can see an overview of the learning foci for the term. You can see the objective of each week and day broken down for you here. And I won't spend too long reading through these because we will make this available for you in the post-webinar email. So we'll send you a copy of this and that will support you in planning for Term 2, that you can just see that little bit of greater detail there as well. This slide details our suggested rollout in line with the term dates. So we'll discuss this a little bit more at the end of the session, but you can see that we advise starting with the revision week from Stage 7 review to accommodate for the 9 weeks in Term 1 and the 11 weeks in Term 2 for a number of the states across Australia. Now, with morphology forming such a large part of the content for this unit, we thought it important to discuss some helpful and relevant terms here before we progress any further. So starting with morphology. And morphology is the study of meaningful parts of words. So it's that awareness that words are comprised of small, meaningful units. And this helps us to spell and comprehend the meaning of words. Explicit teaching of prefixes and suffixes helps students to understand spelling and comprehension. And understanding morphology improves reading and writing skills. We can see the word itself, morpheme, is broken up into its morphemes on screen. So we know that morph meaning form and eme meaning little bit. So the little bits of the word, or the smallest unit of meaning in a word, is a morpheme. Moving on to prefixes and suffixes. So a prefix is a letter or a group of letters added to the beginning of a word to form a new word or to modify the meaning of the original word. Conversely, a suffix is a letter or a group of letters added to the end of the word for the same purpose. You can see vowel suffixes and consonant suffixes represented here. So a suffix that starts with a vowel, like suffix ing or suffix er, is a vowel suffix, and a consonant suffix. You can see some examples on screen, ly or ment. In the Little Learners Love Literacy program, students begin morphology instruction in foundation year, starting with the suffix s and its impact on nouns and verbs. Morphology instruction becomes more frequent in year 2, as we know, once the students have been taught the core alphabetic knowledge. Students learn the 3 spelling rules that must be adhered to when adding vowel suffixes to base words. So the first that you can see on screen, drop the final E. So if a base word ends in E, drop it before adding a vowel suffix. So examples are words like hope to hoping. The second rule is double the final consonant. So if a 1-syllable word has a short vowel before the final consonant, double the consonant, like run to running. And then the third rule, which isn't covered in this term, but it's important for us to touch on because it's in this unit, is changing Y to I. So if a word ends in Y with a consonant before it, change the Y to an I before adding a suffix, like happy to happier. So now we'll dive into some of the background knowledge that will support you in teaching these suffixes and prefixes to your students. So starting with the suffix ed, this is one of the morphemes covered in the unit, and it has 2 meanings. The first example we will look at is for ed meaning an action that was already done. Examples of this are sprinted, jumped and helped, and you can see you can hear the 3 pronunciations that are detailed at the top of the screen here at the end of each of these words. If we break the word jumped down into its morphemes, we know that jump means to push off a surface and ed meaning already done. When we combine them together, the meaning changes the word jump to the jump has been done or jumped. In an example sentence, we can hear, she jumped over the puddle. The other role of the suffix ed is to turn a noun into an adjective. We can see again with the example words interested, locked and coloured that the suffix ed is added. When the suffix ed is added, the meaning changes from a noun like interest to an adjective, interested. And for fun, an example sentence including all 3 pronunciations of ed, a coloured, striped, ripped dress hung on the line. Moving on now to the prefix re, which means to do something again. When we add re to do, we get redo, meaning to do again. I'll redo my homework to correct my mistakes. An alternative meaning for the prefix re is back or in reverse. So return means to turn back. An example sentence is, I'll return my book to the library. So that idea of sending it back. Pre means before. It's obvious here in the word prefix itself, where pre indicates that it comes before the word, but also in our example word preheat, to heat before. Please preheat the oven before baking the cake. For the suffix ure, meaning to make use of or bring something about, you can see we have those two pronunciations again, dictated by the preceding sound. So we have sure like in picture and jure like in treasure. The diver found some sunken treasure. It was an old picture. Similarly to the suffix ure, there are two pronunciations for the suffix ion, meaning the act or state of something. So we have shun, like in action, and jun, like in excursion. There was lots of action on the excursion to the zoo. And again, this is dictated by that preceding letter that you can see at the top of the slide there. The final suffix covered this term will be the suffix ous, meaning full of or having something. We can see in the example word, dangerous, that the suffix alters the meaning of the word danger to mean having danger. The river's current is too dangerous for swimming. And that takes us through to how our lessons work. And Alex is going to jump in here. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Olivia. I just think it's absolutely fascinating, morphology and etymology. It's a really exciting unit of work for us to be able to be moving away from that whole year one unit, really focused on the vowel code, to start getting into the meanings of morphemes and becoming more fluent readers and spellers. So how do the lessons work? The 7.5 lessons, as all of our lessons always do, follow the Little Learners Love Literacy teaching model: revise, teach, practice, apply, and assess. So here I'm going to introduce you to the new lesson structure that we're implementing for stages 7.5 and 8. It's a small modification on what we're used to, and this is an example up on screen for week 2, which is prefixes re and pre, which we now know the meanings of, thanks to Olivia. So we wanted to keep choral reading and words of the week and readers theatre that we introduced last term, really valuable routines for specific instruction on fluency and vocab for year 2 students. But because stage 7.5 isn't a review unit, we've actually got some substantial morphophonemic content to teach this term as well. So to keep the lessons really focused, effective and smooth, we've developed a 2-part lesson plan to show you today. So up on the screen here is the first part of the lesson. We have our revise routines, absolutely as usual. And I'm going to go through each of the routines, what's new, what's not new, and anything new we'll just talk through the details of shortly. So I won't go through each point in detail on this plan, but we'll start with the revise as we always do. And then we'll move into some whole class teaching. And that whole class teaching, 15 to 20 minutes here, is focused completely on teaching, modelling and guided practice of the content within the scope and sequence for that day. So the morphology or phonics content, whatever it might be for that day, this is where we're really focusing in on it. So we'll teach the new focus and practice spelling and writing with that new knowledge as well. That's before we'll go and do some independent practice, and that practice will allow children to work independently on something, on the thing we have just been teaching and practicing together as a group. And then we're going to come back together as a whole class and do the whole class review. So that practice and review before we do something else is slightly different to what we usually do. I'm going to show you the second part. It's still designed to run as one block, just to reassure you. So timing wise, the lesson's still estimated to take 60 to 90 minutes, absolute max. So you can see the timings on screen and refer back to the plans that we're going to share with you in the email that follows with the recording as well. So you can get to grips with a couple of examples of these weekly plans. This review sits kind of, part way through our lesson, and is actually a perfect time and point to have that fruit break and to come together, back together as a whole class again. So the second part looks like this, and that's where we're really going to focus in on our reading fluency skills and our vocabulary and comprehension knowledge. So that second part is going to include whole class teaching, which will be your choral reading, which will run just like it did in the Stage 7 review unit, a 4-part text across the week with some comprehension questions to discuss. And then a word of the week, so some vocabulary instruction, taking a word, a Tier 2 word from the choral reading text to teach explicitly. And obviously that word is also an example of whatever the word study learning focus was for the day. So reconstruct is obviously using our new prefix re and the meaning of that prefix that we've learned that day. And then we're going to do a quick let's write afterwards in this block to practice writing with our new vocabulary word as well. So really focused here on fluency and comprehension. And that's before we're going to then move off and do our reply, which looks very similar to all our other Little Learners plans, and I'll dig into that a little bit later. On day 5, of course, we're going to be keeping the Reader's Theatre as we did from term 1. And that will take this second block up on your 5th day of the week. We've had some lovely feedback about Reader's Theatre and everyone having a lot of fun with it. So I hope that continues into the following term. Okay, so the instructional routines, our aim once again is to keep routines at the heart of what we're doing. So we're not teaching lots of new different activity types, and we can really allow children to focus on the content we are teaching. So again, I can show you on screen that all of the routines we'll be using in term 2 fit on one slide here and underneath the headings of our Little Learners explicit teaching routine. So our revised routines include speed sounds, morphemes, speed words, and a speed write. I'm going to go through these quite quickly in a moment. Our teach routines, this should look familiar as well. We'll be teaching our lesson focus, doing some spelling, which will look like Let's Spell or spelling on mini whiteboards, Let's Write. And then, of course, we have the words of the week, the choral reading and Reader's Theatre. And then in the practice, we have a practice activity for each lesson linked to the focus. And then for application, partner reading and small group reading on days 1 to 4, and the Reader's Theatre practice and performance on day 5. For our review, which now actually comes a little earlier in the day in your Little Learners session, we have a slightly new and really neat way of articulating learning and doing building our knowledge and showing what we know by doing a joint review exercise every day. And I'm going to take you through what that weekly learning chart looks like. And we also have, as earlier in the program, some end of week review practice sheets as well. As you would expect, I hope, everything we are doing in these lessons are all based around explicit teaching models. So we're always doing, I do some teacher-led demonstration, modelling, explanation before we do some guided practice together, the we do, led by the teacher still, and checking for understanding before we let students then go and practice the same thing alone or independently or in pairs to practice, apply, and eventually master. So that gradual release of responsibility still holds throughout all of our routines in this unit. Okay, I promised I'd go through all of the routines. Oh, the order has come up a little funny. I will adjust on the spot. Thank you, Olivia. So our revision routines, hopefully a lot of this looks very familiar to you if you're trained in Little Learners or taught the Stage 7 review unit with us last term. So 1 tweak and 1 new routine here. So speed sounds remain, no changes to that routine. And just so that you know, today I'm going to go through all of the routines in a bit more detail, but what I'm not going to do is go over any routines that are a part of the program previously. So if they were new and we covered them in the webinar last term, or if they're part of the program for year one and prep as well, standard little learners routines. I'm not going to be digging into those today. We've got lots of webinars that dig into those areas, and you're also welcome to, contact us if you're not quite sure what you're meant to be doing around speed sounds and need to get to grips with that playbook. So we're still continuing with speed sounds in this unit. No heart words. There are no new heart words being introduced from stage 7.5. The reason being, children have a lot of code knowledge by now, and what we are trying to do with the stage 7.5 and eventually 8 units is to prepare children to be able to tackle those words that are a bit more irregular. So we want them to feel confident moving away from completely decodable texts during year 2 to seeing some other words that they might not really be familiar with and how to tackle those. So heart words we've waved goodbye to, but new to our revision is morphemes. And I'm going to come back to this on my next slide and show you what that's going to look like. We're keeping speed words, so important to practice some decoding using our previously learnt speed sounds and morphemes for that automaticity and for you to check for understanding before we start. So we're absolutely keeping that. And we are maintaining the speed write revision routine as well, which we introduced for year 2 students last term. We'll keep going with that. I'm going to quickly refresh that one before we move on to how we're going to teach this unit. So the revision routine for morphemes is hopefully quite straightforward. It's a 4-step process. And again, it's detailed in the lesson notes in the teacher resource materials that you'll be able to access. So lots of support there within those lesson notes, but this is how it'll generally run. We'll start by saying there'll be a list of which morphemes to revise, usually 4 to 5. So it's quite a succinct revision routine. We're going to have students say the affix. So students might say, for example, suffix ing. Then they're going to say the chant on the card you're going to show them. So they would say in this example, suffix ing, we are playing a game or playing a game. They're going to say the meaning. Students would say, for this example, a continuous action. They've already learnt this and we've already been revising it a lot since grade 1, first term of end of prep, excuse me. So this is a very familiar morpheme that we are revising here. So we've got say the affix, say the chant, say the meaning, and then you're going to say a base word and the students are going to add that suffix or prefix, whichever it is. In this case, it's a suffix. They're going to add ing onto the end of the base word you give them and say the new word. So in this example, you might say write, students say writing. On to the next morpheme card. So like I said, we're going to repeat this for 4 or 5 previously taught prefixes and suffixes each day. And that's, is part of our interleaved practice, really crucial for keeping things fresh and relevant in our long-term memory, and so that we can apply and use that knowledge throughout the lesson. The card displayed here, I know will probably be a question maybe going off in the Q&A at the moment. The card displayed here is from a new resource that will be coming later in the term called Morphemes and Chants. So I will go through what will be available when, but essentially the front of the card that you see there that you need for the morpheme will be included as a reproducible in the teacher activity resource book. So don't freak out about that too much. The resources you need will all be there. So that's the new morphemes revision routine. To just retouch on the speed write, this is an attempt to make this revision unit or block of the lesson a bit more focused on writing, which is appropriate for year 2. So we've done our speed sounds, we've done our morphemes, we've done our speed words, and now we're going to practice writing some of those things. So we'll dictate, just like in the first term stage 7 review routine, we'll dictate some speed sounds, speed words, and some morphemes for students to write on their mini whiteboards to chin it and for you to check for understanding, providing any feedback and correcting any errors as a whole class. All right. Teach routines. This is what we're all here for, hopefully, and really excited to talk a bit more about this. So we had a quick look at the plan, so you've got an idea of how those teach blocks are going to run. I suppose, wanted to dig into this first point that we have in our teach routines, which is lesson focus. Because that is going to obviously change depending on what the focus content is for the day. The teacher activity resource book lesson notes will provide you with everything you need to teach what the new lesson focus is for the day. And there will be those introduction pages at the beginning of each week that give you any background knowledge you need as well. If you taught the Term 1 Stage 7 Review teacher activity resource last term, you'll have an idea of how supportive those lesson notes are. But I'd like to just expand on this a little bit with a focus on morphology before we continue with the other routines, just to get a feel for what those lesson focus sections of the lesson will feel like. So when we're teaching new morphology, there are some standard elements to how we are going to do this within the Little Learners program with Fidelity. So I've listed them out here, and I'm going to talk you through an example for prefix for the week 2 prefixes re and pre, which I hope will be useful. So to teach new morphology, all the lessons tick these boxes. We're going to say the new affix, the new prefix or suffix to students, tell them what it is explicitly and get them to tell it back to us. We're going to segment it and read it together. Then we're going to define it for students before we give them some practical or physical examples and modeling of what the meaning of that morpheme is and what it does to the base words. We're then going to read some words using the new prefix or suffix. When we read them, we then identify where the new affix is, often underlining it, and define the new meaning of the word. That's something we certainly don't want to skip when we are teaching morphology, because really a lot of these words are actually, with the exception of probably URE and ION, which have some nuances to pronunciation, a lot of the words we're doing in this unit are quite decodable for students with all of the knowledge they've got from prep and year 1 doing the program. So what's really vital when we're reading words together in this unit is to make sure they can identify where the base is, where the new affix is, but especially what the new meaning of that word is. Then we're going to model and practice the new morpheme and chant so they're familiar with it when it comes up in that routine, revision routine in the morning next day. We then follow with spelling, dictation, independent practice and review, and I'll come back to that quite shortly. So an example, I'll try not to linger too long on this slide. I don't want to send anyone to sleep, but I think an example would be useful. So an example would be, this week we're learning 2 new prefixes. Prefixes are parts of words that don't make sense on their own, but can change the meaning of a base word. We add prefixes to the beginning of words. Where do we add prefixes? Students respond chorally. We provide feedback. Display the morpheme card for the new morpheme. Here it's re. And just that's for reference. So today we're learning how to write words using prefix re, and we're learning how adding re changes the meaning of the word. Prefix re has 2 sounds, e, re. And sounded it out with my spelling fingers there. Have students do exactly the same. Ask them, what is our new prefix? And students respond re. Next, we're going to tell them a bit more about that meaning and some examples. So the prefix re means again when it's added to base words. I'm going to write the word use on the board, for example. I'll decode it and ask students, what's this word? And they'll read the word. Today I will use this lunchbox to keep my lunch fresh, but tomorrow I won't get a new lunchbox. I'll use this one again. I'll reuse it. So then I'll add re to the word on the board and decode that new word reuse and ask students to read the word. I'll model and practice the new morpheme and chant, which you can see on the screen here. Prefix re, reuse, paper tubes. Prefix re means again. And then we'll have a quick look at that picture. This has been part of our chants for mnemonics and aiding memory throughout the program. Not too much time to be spent on this, but just a quick acknowledgement of why the chant exists. So once the paper towel tubes are empty, Pip's going to use them again for crafts. She's going to reuse them. And then we're going to check for understanding. What does prefix re mean? Invite a choral response from the children. We'll then go on to just demonstrate the impact of adding re to other base words. So display and read the word write together, for example. So we can decode write together, add the prefix to the word write and read that word rewrite, and then discuss the new meaning, which is to write again. Say we might rewrite something if we make a mistake or we think we can do it better. We'll read more rewords together, which are listed in the notes for you, and discuss those new meanings in a very similar way. Then we'll ask students to put the new word into a sentence by turning to their partner, and you can cold call a few students to share their sentences, and you can do as many words as time allows. I think the thing for explicit teaching of these new morphemes, which is very Little Learners Love Literacy, is that practical and physical example. So we are not trying to drag out at all the teaching or make it fluffy in any way, but what we want is we want to be explicit with what we're teaching students and give them chance to respond, to recall, and to engage with that content. The practical examples are integrated into every new teaching point. So that might be an everyday item like my lunchbox, very straightforward there. Or it might be an action that we can all do together and get up and, get moving as an example. It might be example sentences on the board, or it could be a very simple and focused game for that practical example modeling piece, which we do have a few that are sprinkled across the 7.5 teaching lesson foci, like the listening detective game, Find Your Partner, and we've got a couple of specifics like Ed's game for the ED. Very simple, no prep needed, but something to make the meaning of this new prefix easy to remember for students and to get them up and engaging with something as we are learning that model. Thanks, Olivia. We also utilize some morphology grids or a word matrix to use known morphemes to make words. So, the lesson focus will be usually very focused early in the week on new content, but we do start to use that new content alongside the other morphemes we already know later on in the week. Because we want students to, be able to use all of those prefixes as and when we learn them. So in this example, we bring back un, which was taught in stage 7.1 in year 1, and children relearn un or revise and use it alongside re and pre as the 3 prefixes they've learnt to date. So we'd use these morphology grids to demonstrate how to make new words from one base word or maybe a couple of base words using the prefixes and suffixes we already know. So an example here up on screen, we can demonstrate to students how to make 4 new words using this matrix. So we can write them on the board. Unpacks by selecting from each column. And this action is being done by a person or a thing referred to by a name. She unpacks the shopping bags. You can make unpacking a continuous action. She's still unpacking the shopping bags, or unpacks the past tense. She unpacked the shopping bags earlier today. You can ask students to turn to their partner and write these, then write all the rewords that they can find from this grid on their mini whiteboards and chin it. And you can provide feedback and cold call students to share their words and write them on the board, add them to your list. Repeat with pre, which is your last prefix on this list. And then count the number of words you've been able to make with just pack as the base word, all those different meanings. You can then make and dictate some words using that matrix. So they're all the words or possibilities are listed out for you with those with that teaching support of how to use it. But this is a tool that we do use relatively often to bring together all of our knowledge, new knowledge and existing knowledge on prefixes and suffixes. So just a very quick note for you on the types of words that we are choosing to use in the Stage 7.5 unit. And there's information about this in the TAR. Um, there are, we have used some examples so far, which are unbound base words. So these base words, we can add prefixes and suffixes to, but without those prefixes and suffixes, they make sense on their own. Book, as in pre-book. Book makes sense by itself. Heat makes sense by itself. Pay makes sense by itself. And these are mostly the words that we are working with in the Stage 7.5 unit as we learn new prefixes and suffixes and their meanings and how they change the meanings of those base words. So that is the focus. But of course, there are plenty of words out there with bound roots or bound stems that don't make sense to students without the prefix in place. And these will pop up, and we sprinkle a couple in as well, just for awareness and to to learn a little etymology, but the focus is using that the unbound base words, so that we can really dig into the morphology and become confident with that. After year 2 you would move a lot further towards working on word families with a lot more bound roots and stems, but like I said, we have sprinkled in a couple. So our words of the week in week 2, 2 of our words of the week use bound roots and stems. They're really nice little boxed off words that we can just show and demonstrate and explain to students what they mean, and what the history of those words are. So predict, for example, is one of our words of the week, I think on day 4 of week 2. Pre means before. The root dict doesn't make sense by itself, but it means say or speak. So the word predict literally means speak or say before. So to foretell something. So we have these 2 examples here, but I just want to cover that most of the word choices are those unbound base words, to make things much more manageable for you teaching, as this is new instruction really for morphology, and we want to get the meaning of those prefixes and suffixes across. So teach routines, just to round off. So we've been through that lesson focus and what that might look like for a new morpheme. We are always going to follow the lesson focus, whether if it's morphemic or phonemic, because we do have some new GPCs in the 7.5 unit as well. Spelling on mini whiteboards or Let's Spell are the 2 spelling routines that will always follow that lesson focus. So we want to get straight on to some spelling together. Spelling on mini whiteboards works exactly as usual. I'm not going to dig into that today. We did touch on it again last term's webinar. Let's Spell. That's scaffolded word level dictation and runs as the routine as usual. So if you need any support with Let's Spell, the teacher activity resource and also the spelling webinar might be a good first step for you there, but you can also reach out to us. And then we're going to do that Let's Write dictation focused on using the new prefix, the new suffix, or the new phoneme grapheme correspondence. And then the second part, well, routines are the choral reading, words of the week, or the reader's theatre, and a Let's Write using our words of the week. Independent practice, not much to show here because it's so straightforward. So there'll just be one activity that's linked directly to the lesson focus, and whatever whole class guided practice we've been doing. So there are some really familiar activity types in the TAR, silly or sensible, which words, some read, write and draw and more. So they are designed to do within the 10-minute period, and we recommend teacher roaming and feedback during that time, and then we'll bring everyone back together for the whole class review. The purpose of the whole class review is to check for understanding of the lesson's learning focus, and it's to fight that forgetting curve. So we want to be really doing a review within an hour of that instruction in practice to fight that curve. So that's why we've brought it forward, keeping the teach, practice and the review really tight together for that new content that we are learning. There are specific questions, as always, and activities in the lesson notes in the teacher activity resource for each lesson, and they can vary a little, but we do have a new a way that's going to run throughout the Stage 7.5 TARs and lesson structure for doing a review, which I'm very excited about. These are our learning review charts. And the idea with these learning review charts, I've got an example on the next slide I'll show you in a second, is that we're going to build a record of learning throughout the week together. It's a 4-part poster or 2-page poster into 4 parts, so to match your days 1 to 4 learning. And we're going to complete the gaps in these learning review charts together as a class, and you'll get responses from students to fill those in by asking for choral responses or partner talk, followed by some cold calling or use of mini whiteboards. And that's all explained or prompted within those lesson notes. But hopefully it should look quite straightforward. Here's an example. This is what we know about prefixes re and pre. This is our focus for week 2. And on the first day, we would be looking to fill out the first section of our learning chart. So together we'll fill in the gaps in this review chart, and then we're going to read it together. So first you'd have students respond chorally to write the answer in the first gap. So a prefix is added to the what of the word. Your prompt, if you needed to scaffold, would be beginning or end, of course, and you're looking for a quick choral response, and then you can fill in beginning. Ask students to write today's focus prefix on their mini whiteboard, which is re, and ask them to chin it and say the meaning, which is again, provide feedback, and then fill in the gap on the chart. Prefix re means again. Next, students will have to write, you'll dictate the word restart, and they'll have to write it on their mini whiteboard and chin it. And then you can model writing the word restart on the chart here as well. And then we'll talk about the meaning. So you can cold call students to tell you the meaning, to start again, and then we're going to repeat with rewrite. Once we've filled in our gaps for today's review, we're going to read the whole thing together. So we'll choral read. A prefix is added to the beginning of the word. Prefix re means again. And then we'd have our example words, which were restart, meaning start again, rewrite, meaning write again. Done. We saved the next section for tomorrow's lesson. And this is a great tool. By the time we get to the end of the week for day 5 review, we've got something that really succinctly tells students exactly what we've learned during the week. And it's a really useful tool to go back to and have on display throughout the week as well. All right, skipping down to application. So our small group reading and writing remains absolutely essential for supporting students to practice and apply their skills. So working with a small group while other students complete their partner reading together. So our advice hasn't really changed around what you would do in these small group reading and writing time in your class. You select the text within the zone of proximal development. There's no requirement to read the whole text. Now our stage 7.5 decodable books, they're much longer, and we want to use this time effectively, which means we have to do some writing because we're in year 2 now. We need to make sure we're giving some of that time to writing. Children can finish reading a text together in partner reading. You can still guide, model, discuss a text, work on fluency together using the usual structure for small group reading. But just a note, I suppose, you don't have to pressure yourself to finish a whole text in that session. And so that make time for writing. Lots of extra Let's Spells and Let's Write resources are provided in the TAR. So we're scheduled to do probably like 2 or 3 Let's Spells a week. There are at least double or more Let's Spells than that available to you in the TAR. So use those, and the same with Let's Write for extra practice with that group. If that's within the zone of proximal development and what you're wanting to work with that group on that day, there's plenty of resources for you to use for the writing. If you need some extra scaffolding, you might want to use SoundSwap, for example. Plenty of advice around that within the TAR and in our small group reading webinar support. Or you can dictate from the text you read. That would help if you're doing a different level of text. And use the observation form. Inform your planning, keep some notes. It's a really, really good formative assessment opportunity whilst you're working really closely with these students. Partner reading hasn't changed much either. So let's just really look at what students are going to be reading in this partner reading session. So the routine has not changed. Guidance around that routine is exactly the same. But what should they be reading? We've got the stage 7.5 decodable books, the fiction and the non-fiction. They should absolutely be reading those if that's at the right you'll deem the right level for them, because it's a perfect opportunity to practice what we've been learning during the lesson or the previous week. Fluency Fun is still absolutely relevant as well. Books 1 and 2 from your first term may be really good choices for students to really practice their fluency and build their confidence into this term. And books 3 and 4, when they are released later in the term, would also be great options for you. So there's lots of options for things you could use for that partner reading routine. Okay, I hear you say, you've mentioned Fluency Fun is coming later in the term. What's the deal? So I'm just going to go through planning ahead and implementation quite quickly with you. So the teacher activity resource. This will contain hopefully what you've come to expect from a Little Learners teacher activity resource, Year 2 playbook, the weekly plans, teacher daily lesson notes, and any teaching resources that you require for doing that lesson. So whether that's some Let's Write or Let's Spell sheets, or basic morpheme cards I showed you earlier, or any new speed sound cards, reproducibles will be available in the TAR. The practice activities you need will be there. Your choral reading text and the QR code for the slides for those will be there, and the words of the week vocab cards will be there. We sent out an email last week outlining exactly what you could expect if you're going to be moving along this journey with us this term and going to be starting to teach as we release the materials. We're really excited to work with you, and we love feedback as we go as well. But just to be clear, this is what we're expecting. So, and this is how we'd like it to, we think it would be best to work. So the TAR as a whole book isn't going to be ready during the holidays for you. We're still working through a few final items on some of the later weeks. So what we're suggesting is that you order the TAR on our website to receive the content as soon as it comes available. So anybody that's put in that order on the website will get the materials digitally as soon as they are available. Of course, if you get a print, that will come in for you as well when we get that into stock. And these are the dates that we are working towards. As just another little tiny note on this one, in case you're worried, the Readers Theatre text will be supplied for these Blue Weeks as we send out the digital resources, because the Readers Theatre is within the Fluency Fun books, and they will be released towards the start of May. So you won't be without the essentials to teach the scope and sequence for term 2 if you have ordered your teacher activity resource. Having said that, there are some new things coming later in term, which hopefully might be quite exciting, but you certainly don't need them to get up and running with the teaching. So available to order now, these are the things that you would like to have in your classroom to teach with fidelity. I think that's the term someone asked a question, what do I need to teach with fidelity this term? Love that question. Thank you so much. This is what we would recommend you need to teach with fidelity. So you get your teacher resource ordered, your decodable books, non-fiction and fiction. You might want to have the small group reading notes that go with those books, because that takes a lot of the prep out of running those reading sessions and writing sessions. The sound charts, stages 1 to 7, are still really handy to have around. And of course, the speed sounds and chants cards, we're still using those in our revision every day, are handy to have as well. Coming later in the term, these things will not be available to pre-order, so we'll let you know when they're up, being ready for you to order and in stock. The next 2 Fluency Fun books, Pirate Rex and Perfect Surf, with a new illustrator. They're going to be so fantastic. They're going to come, the 3rd book will be beginning of May, fourth book will be beginning of June. We're also working on printed versions of those morphemes and chance cards I showed you earlier. I've just put a back and front picture on there for you to show that the display cards, when we publish them, will have extra to what you would be getting in the TAR. So TAR will give you the basics, which you need the fronts to be able to do that revision. The backs will have nice word lists on there for you and a summary of the meaning, so you have access to what you need as you're going. So we're really excited about those, but you certainly don't need these things to get up and running this term, but I think you will be much in love with them when they come out later in the term. For subscribers to Little Learners of Literacy Online, digital versions of the weekly plans will be available with some slides to support core routines as and when the teacher activity resource content is released. Having said that, week 1 and week 2 weekly plans are live on there at the moment, so you could have a look at those. We're also going to be sending the Word doc version as part of a download with the recording of this for those 2 weeks. So don't feel left out if you don't have a subscription, but they are up there and live for you now. Won't spend too much on this. I think I've covered this off. I think we can probably move on from this one, Olivia. And then the last piece with implementation is just a touch on assessment. We had a couple of questions about this over the last term, and this is completely understandable. We didn't have a year 2 scope and sequence prior, so we've had to be working on developing what those benchmarks look like for year 2. So this is what they will be. And the additional subtest, the non-word subtest for the LARS and the last spelling subtest for Stage 7 review or Stage 7R will be released at the start of next term and shared with you. So if you've downloaded the LARS before, you'll get the LARS extra subtest. If you've bought the LAS, then that'll be sent to you as well. And if you've got any issues, you just need to email us and we'll share those. But we'll tell you when they're ready. And I'd highly recommend you sign up for the assessment webinars next term to learn a little bit more. The benchmarks will be shifted a little based on what this new teaching sequence looks like, our teaching sequence looks like. So mid-year benchmark, Stage 7.R will be the reading benchmark and Stage 7.4 for spelling, which hasn't changed. And our end of year 2 benchmark, 7.5 for reading and 7.5 for spelling. Over to you, Olivia.
Thank you. So lots of exciting information there, but we are aware that it is a lot of information that we're giving in this webinar. So of course, we are always here for you to contact us if you need any help. You can use our online contact form on the website. You can email or call our customer services team and Michelle will help you there. You can book a 45-minute consult with our school partnerships manager, and you can access the links to these resources as we've mentioned. So we're going to send out the 10-week overview as well as those 2 weekly planners that Alex mentioned in the follow-up email from this session. As always, please be sure to visit our website and subscribe to our newsletter for updates on the latest information, and the blog and the newsletters are always going to be the first point of call for anything related to year 2. So do keep in touch there. And we really would like to thank you for attending today. We hope that you found it useful. We will have a look now at the Q&A and do our best to answer your questions. I've been looking throughout most of the time and it's just about when things will be available. So Alex has answered that in the last couple of slides. There was one question, Alex, just about an example for the summary of learning at the end of the week. Will those answers be in the teacher activity resource book?
Yes, yeah, the answers are absolutely provided for in the lesson notes, the teacher notes.
Yes, and when will they be able to purchase it online, the pre-order the TAR online?
Good question. I didn't cover that, so whoever asked that, thank you very much for the reminder. The ambition is to have a link up and ready for you guys when we send the recording out so you can put in your order for that TAR.
Terrific. It really looks like the bulk of the questions are just about when. So I'll just have another look. Yes, another question about whether it would be online, which Alex has answered that yes, weeks 1 and 2 are already there. And a question. So what would you recommend that we teach for the first few weeks of term 2 if this isn't available until the end of May? So just to clarify there, if you purchase the teacher activity resource book, we'll make sure that you have the content required to teach weeks 1 and 2 as soon as it's available. So you will be able to access those. So that's what we recommend you teach, what's outlined in those initial weeks. Can we see pricing again? Yes, I'll flick back to those slides. And another question, where are weeks 1 and 2? So as Alex mentioned, that'll all be sent to you in the follow-up email from this webinar. So have a look out for that in the coming days.
So that, to be clear, week 1 and 2 weekly plans up live on the Little Learners Love Literacy online subscription service. And we will give Word documents of those 2 weekly plans in the follow-up email to this webinar. Weeks 1 and 2 TAR content are scheduled to release at the beginning of next term as per the dates we put in this webinar presentation and in our email sent out next week, which Sam sent out last week, sorry. We're getting towards the end of the day now. Sent out last week, so you have that schedule available for the full content, Amanda.
That looks like all of the questions, Alex.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Olivia.
Thanks very much, everybody. I'll end the webinar now, but again, please keep in touch and we're always here when you have other questions. So thanks very much, everybody. Have a nice afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.